We have Harsha Bhogle right here with us. At upGrad, we always do a twist to a tale, and I think we always want to talk about things that have some sense of life learning lessons. I think we're all here. We want to draw on inspirations from people like you, Harsha, and then we want to probe questions in a very different manner for us to be able to understand what does it mean for me, because what's in it for you. And I think we now have about 5,000 people live, and hopefully over the next 3-4 days when this stays on there, there'll be a lot more, 100,000 more. And I think more or less learning and what it means for people, I think is the real criterion. So in the next 60 minutes, we're going to try and do that, keep it a little bit of interactive, ask as many questions as we want to. And I want to go back to, Harsha and I think when we met the very first time.
It was too many years ago, Ronnie.
Yeah, we don't want to mention how many years ago because both of us work very hard at trying to look younger than we may possibly be.
Some succeed better than others, some need help.
Yeah, exactly. And it was oddly enough because we were doing a television show called Cricket with a K, okay, and it's way before everybody's time. But that was the time at which, can you imagine a sport like cricket actually needed marketing in a very different manner, because there were still 5 days cricket matches at that time, right? It wasn't the 20-20 and the 50-50 overs.
No, there were 50 overs, but
the 20
was a long way away.
Yeah,
20 was a long way away.
Those were sort of early days. So what I want to start by asking you is, have you felt to be an outsider in what you're doing right now? And I think the reason I ask that is for a lot of people in life, you always feel you're an outsider getting into, sometimes from a domain point of view, sometimes from a work point of view. So just want to first touch on that.
It's an interesting word. I think it's the story of my life actually, because I didn't have what it took to be in this profession. If you look at what the qualities you need in this profession, let's say the profession is hosting live sport.
Correct.
Which is what I did for most of my time. If you haven't scored 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 runs or taken 200, 400 wickets, did you take them? No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Did you look wow? No, I didn't. Could you carry off noodle straps? No, I couldn't. So the list of things I could not do was always greater than the list of things I could. And so yes, in everybody else.
But you wouldn't trade places. I mean, you're comfortable about it, because I think the messages you're sending out to everyone, which is most important, is you got to work your backside for it.
Yes, there's never been an alternative to that.
Yeah.
And never will be.
Correct. And I think that's the most important takeaway also, that if you don't have a choice, because most people think, oh, but I'm the outsider, what if I don't have domain knowledge, what do I look at situations, and then you step back. Actually, that's the time to step forward for that. And I think that's the inspiration, and I wanted that very strong message, because 9 out of 10 people really feel they're an outsider in the room, outsider in their profession, outsider in their domain knowledge, where they want to start their business.
You were, Ronnie, when you got into film production, you were outsider.
I think I've been an outsider most of my life. And I think now we own a kabaddi team, a volleyball team, and a table tennis team. And everyone asks me, so which of these 3 sports do you play? And I said, none of them. So and that makes me the outsider too,
No, but that's an interesting point in itself, because there's a misconception that to run sport, you have to be a sportsperson.
Exactly.
There is no greater misconception in life than that. So he's proof of that.
And I think that's very important as a lesson for everyone to take away, just from a domain point of view. So the other sort of big quiggle for everybody when they're in their careers, midlife careers, young careers, is this whole challenge of how do I strike out at my next interview? So first I just want to ask you, have you experienced job interviews, or you had the luxury of not being interviewed?
Well, I haven't told this story before.
Okay, so now let's hear it.
But the only job I ever wanted in life, ever wanted in life, was to work at Rediffusion. And
which is an advertising agency for a lot of the younger generation here.
Which is an advertising agency, then became Young and Rubicam and Rediffusion, and got back. Rediffusion in the early 80s was the hotshot creative place. I'm in my 3rd year in engineering college, and I see the ads for Ikim computers, for garden saris.
High level of creativity.
Yeah, there's a blade called Savage. It said the dawn of every man's life. The dawn in every man's life is touched with the Savage experience. And I said, wow, I want to be part of all this. Rediff was the only place. There was not a chance in hell I was going to get there. Luckily, and all these accidents happen as a byproduct of wanting it badly enough and working hard enough, I got into IIM Ahmedabad. I don't know how, but I got in. And I pestered Ajit Balakrishnan and Ashok Bijapur. I literally pestered them every day. I wanted it so badly that my interview was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. Because sometimes when you want things too badly and you think, what if I fail? Then you're inviting failure. And I was so worked up that my brain wasn't working. I was mumbling answers. And after that, I got a call from the placement office saying, they want to meet you. And I said, oh. And there was Ashok Bijapurkar. And he said, what happened today? I said, I'm sorry, I've never done a worse interview in my life. He said, I'm taking you on the condition that you never do such a bad interview ever again.
Now, how many people would like the luxury of that? But actually, there has to be a story in that. See, because I think it's not, there has to be that some impression you left behind.
I wanted it very, very badly.
Yeah, exactly.
I would ask him about advertising. Every time I met him, I'd ask him more about advertising.
Sometimes it's not, you know, it's like our kids when they go to school, and in that 15 minutes, they have to figure out whether they're going to get into a school or not. It's not about that. It's about what you take away. And I think maybe at that time, Ajit or whatever would have taken away your hunger to want to be in that job. So sometimes it's how you say it, sometimes it's what you say. It's not always in the same context.
And many years later, Ronnie, when I started covering cricket and I saw teams choking on a big day, I said, I think I know why that happens.
Yeah.
Because you're tense. You're so worried about failing that you're inviting failure.
Yeah.
So
loosen
that was mine.
So any other strong...
So
most people
that was
have
my
that
interview.
crossroad when they look at interviews and job interviews and what they want to do there.
The only other interview as such that I've had was when, as we call it, proper television was coming to India. TWI from the UK was coming to India, and they were looking for Indian commentators, and there weren't that many. Sunil Gavaskar was around still. Ravi Shastri was towards the end of his playing career. Sanjay hadn't arrived yet, and I had worked a lot on radio overseas, so there was a qualification there. So I said, will you meet me at the Oberoi? I said, this sounds good to start off with straight away. And then he literally did a half-hour interview with me saying, if you had to share a box with Jeffrey Boycott, what would you do? On the understanding that Jeffrey is not always very kind to youngsters starting out, and he'll call out your mistakes if you do. So I remember saying in that interview, I'll just play in the V till I earn his respect.
And so, have you been stressed enough to rehearse for an interview ever?
I didn't know, actually. I was lucky. I didn't know there was going to be an interview.
Right, okay.
So he said, what will you do in this situation? What will you do in that situation? But if you get stressed, I think there's a difference between being prepared and being stressed. The more prepared you are, the better off you are at an interview. But you can almost over-prepare and be ready with your answers. It's like saying, I'm going to drive through the offside, I'm going to drive through the offside, but the ball's pitched on the leg. You can't. So you need to be prepared, but you cannot wait for the one question that you're prepared for because it might never come. So
see, that's the beauty about having him on, because there's always a relation to a sport, and then suddenly everyone's nodding like, I got it, now I got it. Up till now I was figuring it out, but now I got it. Pitch to the left, get the ball in silly mid-off, and then you're all sorted out. So the topic today, which we've chosen, is MBA clean bold. Okay, I don't know whether you kind of...
I saw that.
Yeah, so I think it's a sort of a loaded question in both sides, and I think it was more with a question mark. And it's a big question mark. I mean, how relevant do we think management degrees are today? How has that helped people in life? And actually, it's now becoming $1 million question for a lot of people, because it's about, in the middle of their life, if they haven't done it, then they feel, am I left out? Do I need to go back in there? And management is one element, because now today MBAs are not just about HR, marketing and finance. It's about all the careers of tomorrow. It's about business analytics. It's about so many other things.
I'm so glad you said about careers of tomorrow. I'm actually the wrong person to ask this question, because it changed my life. It changed my life because I entered an institute that to me is still a temple. So I'm a bit biased towards it. Even today, all those years later, I passed out in '85. We are now 2019. When I pass through the gates, I bow and go in, because it changed my life. So I'm a little biased from that point of view. But I think an MBA is a passport. It cannot be a prison. A lot of people ask me, so you did an MBA and you wasted a seat, didn't you? I can't call it an MBA. It was PGDM for a long time. It was a postgraduate diploma. Now it's an MBA. And I believe an MBA is a very well-structured general education. You cannot say, I'm coming out now and you know what, I can do funds flow statements better than anybody else, and I can do market segmentation better than anybody else. It teaches you a certain way of approaching things. What did an MBA teach me? It teaches you a problem solving method. It teaches you to take a situation, break it down and say, right, this is what it is, here's a system, this is how it's going to solve issues. One of the problems with doing an MBA from recognized top 10, top 15 schools is it tends to slot you into certain careers. It's now in the last 4 or 5 years that they're talking about entrepreneurship, that they're actually having incubation labs, that they're encouraging you to have good ideas and start on your own. But earlier, when we were passing out, we were actually trained to fit into certain slots in companies. In my case, I don't think I learned such a lot because I was a slightly immature, slightly gauche 22-year-old kid who'd come from a software engineering course into what was then the toughest MBA course in India, among the toughest of all time.
Tough to get in and tough to pass out, both.
It was very tough to get in, but my biggest achievement was getting out.
Yeah, okay.
Because I've spent many nights thinking, what if I'm sent home? Because my father was so excited that I'd got in there. I mean, I was excited too, but he was even more excited than I was. What if I have to go back? And I spent my first 6-8 months only thinking of averting failure, which is a very negative way of doing it, but you learn through your mistakes. If I'd been positive, I would have done even better in my first year. But what it taught me two things. One is the people around me were so incredibly, almost unfairly gifted. And so it gave me a complex, but I learned from being with them. But it taught you that there is an approach to everything. And that if you follow that approach, you're all right. But it's not a prison. If you get out of an MBA, it doesn't mean you only have to be that.
That's a lovely phrase you use, that it's a passport, not a prison. But I think a lot of learning is about that.
Yes.
It's not something that should put you in a bind in any case, but it's something that you should feel liberated about. And that's what
also, Ronnie, it's not the job of the teacher to teach you. It's your job to learn from the teacher.
Yeah.
It's not your job to learn. So I hear a lot of people say, you know what, the teacher didn't teach me anything. Excuse me, but what did you learn from the teacher? Did you try to learn from the teacher, or did you say, you know what, I'm sitting back, dude, come on, it's your job to teach me? No, it's your job to learn from the teacher. So,
yeah. So if you had to do it all over again, you'd do it.
Well, for a start, I'd work before I went there.
Okay, so that's I wanted to get that layering there.
I'd
so what are
work
the kind
before I
of
got
one or two tips that you think from your learning? And you wanted to get there because you wanted to join advertising? Was that your motivation at that stage?
It was, but when you passed out of an engineering college in 1983, then your best possible outcome was getting a job in a public sector firm, or the IITs that just started offering MTech. There was an entrance exam called GATE. So that was your other best option, which in effect was keeping employment at bay for another couple of years. And then you thought with the IIT MTech you might get a job somewhere, which was an illusion at the time, but you're willing to buy into that illusion. So what did you do? If you got into an IIM, or into a leading management school, that was a gateway to where the employers were. So that was what I was thinking.
Yeah.
But
today,
yes,
if you said
it allowed,
do it again, you would?
I would have worked somewhere if I had the option. Today's young people, you have no idea how lucky you are. If anyone in this generation complains about opportunities, then there's the outdoor, you can go and wait outside.
Yeah.
Because in this generation does not have the right to complain about there not being opportunities, because you have no idea what not having an opportunity is. So I would have worked, because I would have then understood finance better, I would have understood sales better, because I would have been in that function a little bit, I would have known. So to me, studying production management or studying accounts one was no different from studying first law of thermodynamics. Was no different from studying chemical reaction engineering, because you went to a class, you studied, you prepared, and you wrote exams. So I didn't learn as much as I could have. If I'd worked for a couple of years, I would have been a little more confident. I was a very underconfident young man going there, and I was just dazzled by the talent of people over there, and that hurt me even more. So yes, I would have studied a little more, I would have been a little more mature.
How do you think about sort of the competitive environment versus the collaborative environment today? Because I'm a strong believer that today we get a lot more done by being collaborative, by being competitive. And there's a whole level of people here who still believe, kill everyone and then that's the best way to survive.
There is no
So what's
option.
that kind of strategy?
There's no option but to be collaborative. I mean, so often you hear stories like, yeah man, I went and killed it. Yeah, you killed it. One of the things we say when Anita and I, my wife and I, do a series of corporate learning programs called The Winning Way, we say, are you setting up a goal for someone else to score? Nobody scores a goal unless someone sets up a goal. You cannot score unless someone's passed. It's not, in the old days they talk about Balbir Singh at the bully off, in hockey you say the bully off, not the pass. And he took the ball and dribbled past 8 people and scored a goal all by himself. Wow, legend. No, you only score a goal when somebody passes. And if you are not willing to pass, nobody will pass to you. So the MBA with the old American myths around it is about you. No, you got no chance if you're you. And I'll tell you a story. We did a program in 2004. It's the first time I'm telling the story. We did a program on ESPN Star called The Dream Job. I still haven't got over the fact that they call it Harsha ki coach, but that was fantastic.
They need a Hindi twist to it. So
No, the English version was Hunt for Harsha as
Okay,
well.
right, sure.
Because that was the job. People didn't know what the job of an anchor was. When we got down to the final 4 or 5, my choice for number 1 was a certain person. My producer was an Aussie guy. And we sat down and said, okay, right, we've seen everybody, now let's see who we think. And each one voted. And I said, I think this kid's the most talented. He said, no, mate. He said, there's no way he's among the top 3. I said, why? He said, he's got so much room for himself, he's got no room for anybody else. He said, he won't be a team player. Live television is one of the biggest team sports you will ever encounter. Live television is a team sport. And unless you are willing, you're able to play in a team, you've got no chance. So the best did not get selected because he did not have space for other people. He was not willing to collaborate. So
Yeah.
there is no future if you're the solo artist. That's only in Sunny Deol.
yeah, and I think that's a very important takeaway, because today I think, whether you're starting your own business, you want to change in your career, you're working with peers, that's element of competitiveness will always be there to a little extent, but mind-boggling stuff you can get done if you're going to be more collaborative, and that's a strong takeaway.
It's a tricky one in Mumbai though, Ronnie, because Mumbai is such a driven city and such a thickly populated city that unless you're driven for yourself, you don't get noticed. You've got to get into the train, right? You can't say, let's get a train together. You've got to get into the train. You've got to get into that coaching class. You've got to get that cutoff stage. If you're in medicine, of course, you've got no chance because
So you
whatever.
just feel elbows is the way to go.
So you feel that you have to drive yourself forward and push people down and rise up on their shoulders. So it's difficult. All of a sudden, you can't become a team player overnight, but there is no future but to be a team player.
So let's talk about teams, and let's get to a little bit of that, because I think team dynamics in sport is also very tricky, right? I mean, first you've got the coach, who is all-encompassing. Then you've got a captain. Then you've got a team. And as popular as your team gets, then everyone is a personality by themselves.
Correct.
So that's a tough dynamics.
Can you imagine coaching Barcelona or Real or
Yeah,
Manchester
I mean, everyone's
City?
a superstar, right?
Yeah, everyone's
so
a superstar.
how do you coach 11, 12 superstars going up to whatever else, and then there's a coach, and there's a team captain, then there's an owner who may want a completely different...
Or you're India, where, and we've got a lot of young players coming through now. But the example, there's two, in my sport, there have been 2 interesting incidents. One is a great Australian team in the 80s, when they were absolutely at their nadir. They were gone, they were dead, they were down. And at that stage, the job of the coach was different, because the coach then had to remind them that they were good enough. Because they were really low, they were gone, their captain had cried and walked off a press conference. Aussie men crying, sorry, it doesn't work. Right? There were no metrosexuals then. Sorry, you're this tough Aussie there. So he had to remind them that they were good. And he said something very interesting. He said, we build on attitude first. You might be the best player, but if you're not part of the 11, then you don't get picked. And a lot of very good players didn't get picked for Australia in that time, but it gave rise to a lot of very solid team players. David Boone, Steve Waugh, those kind of players, tough, hard, tough guys, they all came together. So that was one example, and Australia rebuilt on attitude first. That was the job of the coach. That was Bob Simpson. Then you come to India in the aftermath of the 2007 World Cup. And for a while, you didn't have a coach, and then Gary Kirsten arrived.
Yeah.
And Gary Kirsten had started his career after Tendulkar, retired, and Tendulkar was still playing. He said, how do I coach Tendulkar? And his approach was, I'm in a team of people who are already very good. I don't have to teach them how to play because they already know it. So here's a completely different example. So he said, I will work harder than you at making you better. So he said, we will not work on your faults. You have to know your faults, obviously. But if you have come so far, you're obviously very good at what you've done. Let's make you better at what you're already good at. So that was how he coached a really good side. So it really depends if you're a coach, you're a teacher, on what stage your students, your team is in. But at all times, you've got to be positive.
Sense of sort of bigger than, and then in awe and intimidation. And I think as a coach and as a leader, you need to be able to straddle that part where a lot of you might feel somebody's my boss. That doesn't mean you need to figure out whether you're handling. And I think if you correlate that in a working environment where I think teamwork is about 40% of the reason why companies slow down most of the times and don't lose on competitiveness in some form or the other.
Also, sport is probably it's a much talked about area, but sporting teams are small teams. So a national team is 14, 15, 17, 18 maybe players. A kabaddi team is probably around that size as well.
Yeah,
so
7 on the mat and
on
11,
the mat and
yeah,
some on that.
11 up.
So
Yeah.
if you're a coach, we often talk about understanding the whole person. Because the person who takes the field is not just an athlete. The person who takes the field is a human too. So can you understand that person? But you only need to understand 12, 15 players.
Yeah.
So understanding Tendulkar is completely different from understanding Gambhir, is completely different from understanding Yuvraj. Because they're very, very different personalities. So, but you only have to understand 15 people. If
So
you're running a larger team,
put
it's
that in
tough.
an organization space for
Yeah.
people, you know, because I think everyone thinks managing peers is always a challenge. And then you sort of either clamp up, or you get very competitive, or you get disruptive or destructive. So what's your sort of message out for everybody on teamwork when it comes to the workplace?
I think, to my mind, and I've not had a professional career as much, but my teams have been sort of teams that have come together in broadcasting, is that you have to respect the guy next to you. If you start thinking, you know what, I'm bigger than you, I'm much better than you, then you start sneering, start looking down, and you leave yourself vulnerable. Can you respect the other person? But also, can you learn from what the other people around you are doing? And that's what makes you a good team player. In television, some days, my role in television was to make the other guy look better. Was not to compete with that person, because I couldn't. My success lay in making the other person look better. But if you consistently make the other guy look better, you become indispensable.
Yeah.
So but you can only work in teams like those if the leader has created an environment where people are willing to play for each other. If the environment is, I'll have two guys doing the same job, you kill each other, man, and I'll get the better guy going, that organization will never go too far.
Yeah.
So can you respect each other, play for each other, but that can only happen if when you're passing, if someone else is passing to you. So team environment is created by the leader even more than by the players.
So you've seen a lot of coaches, you've seen a lot of captains, and I think you've interviewed them, you've interacted with them, you've seen them from the outside and the inside. But if you had one or two sort of strong takeaways for what is the qualities of a leader that you're putting from a sport that would work? What are the top two things?
It's actually interesting. We've asked this question. It's something we talk about in our presentations a lot as well. We asked a lot of captains, what is the one quality a leader must have? Assume it's only one.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many of them said honesty. It's incredible how many of them said honesty. He said, my players have to trust me. If I'm asking them to do something, they must trust me. They must trust that I'm doing it for their own good. And he said, unless you're honest with your players will never respect you back. It's amazing how many people said honesty.
But that's a brilliant one, actually, because
Yeah.
I think integrity plays an important, and most people think integrity is about, but it's actually building trust.
Yeah, increasingly,
it is about building trust.
Increasingly in our world, we talk about this ghastly expression called jugaad. It is the sworn enemy of excellence.
Yeah.
Sworn enemy of excellence. Jugaad means, let me get it done today, I don't care for tomorrow. The
Yeah,
business will
I think
also
the
be like
Jugaad context was much more about creative innovation,
Yes,
but
it
it's
was.
actually become a shortcut approach to things. And I think that's the typical sort of maybe Indian way of us looking at both. And I think part of it is because sometimes you find it's very just difficult to do business in India, and therefore you need to take the Jugaad way. But it's become a bit of a bragging way. So that I agree with you, that there's a cautionary note when it comes to that. But just staying on that, and I think that's very, very critical, important for everyone to take away, because honesty, whether it's at a leadership or at a colleague level, it's magical, because it's not about honesty, but it's about earning trust, and it's about building the trust. Because the minute you're candid and you are who you are, you may think you're in a competitive environment, but actually you've taken the stress out of everybody else, because when you're candid and honest, it's very difficult for somebody else to pin you down.
And sometimes we think we're playing T20. And we see someone who's being dishonest, someone who's bending the rules, going ahead. But actually in life, we're playing test cricket. We're playing 35 years. We're playing 30, 35, 40-year careers. Hopefully 40, because people are now working later, working longer into their lives. So you're playing 30, 35-year career. If someone is bending the rules to go ahead for a week, that's okay. You know, in a marathon race, if someone is 100 meters ahead of you, that's okay. You got, by the end, as long as you finish first, that's okay.
Yeah. So I got two broad topics to talk, and then I'm going to throw it open to our online audience and everywhere else. Just overall data. I mean, that seems to be, even the Prime Minister now says out there, data is the new gold. The number one industrialist in the country says data is the new oil.
Yes.
So wherever you go,
he's got both.
Yeah.
He's got both.
So that he's prioritizing. He's prioritizing, and the Prime Minister is putting it into perspective in a different manner. But overall, when you look at that, the power of data, I think everyone's kind of put that into an awe sector, but the practicality of what you do with it is more important than learning it.
Yes.
And I think everyone's got so excited about the understanding and comprehension of data that this applicability, it's a little bit like your MBA. I mean, what are you going to do with it rather than you having it is most important.
One of the things that's happening in sport, and I suspect it might be happening in the corporate world outside of sport as well, is that data is telling you things that you didn't know before. All along, we took decisions based on gut, on hypotheses, and you'll find a lot of people still look down on data because data is making them uncomfortable, because data is challenging their hypothesis. Life was so good before data, you know, because you could say,
You could bluff your way around.
Yeah, I've been in this line 20 years, listen, I'm the oracle, this is how things are done. Until suddenly there's this nerd who's sitting there right down there, putting his hand on his, sir, but data is saying something different. And now you've got to say, oh, okay, you down there. But data is now throwing you so much. My brother teaches big data, so he keeps telling me more stuff than I learn from elsewhere.
It's showing people up.
It is showing people up,
Yeah.
and it is ruining the convenient, lazy hypothesis. It's happening in broadcasting as well. It's
It's also throwing away precedence, I think. You know,
Yeah.
it's like just that, okay, this is how it got done. When everyone talks about the word precedent with so much authority, and I think it's just thrown the context of precedent, historical things out of the way.
Yeah.
And it's really put people in the center line. So
What it's also doing, data though, is it's telling you so much that you're almost tempted to think that data is God. What data is doing is it is offering relationships to you that you didn't know existed, especially big data. It's offering relationships. It's telling you if you do this, this is the likely outcome. If you do this, this is the likely outcome. But is data the decision maker, or are you the decision maker? But if you have to be the decision maker, you've got to understand what data is throwing up. And sometimes we don't like that. So I think the issue before managements these days is, what do I do with the data? The data doesn't decide for you. The data clears the path for you to give you more, to allow more informed decision making. And data is, in my sport, data is revolutionizing sport.
Yeah.
It's happening in football, it's happening everywhere. Data is revolutionizing the way we understand sport. I'm sure it's happening in the movies as well.
yeah, no, absolutely. It is a powerful tool
Yeah.
from that perspective. And I'm going to end this with how important is luck? You know, do you think you're sitting here, landed here, and you think a lot of that has to do with luck? Because now most people, when all else fails, you say, the other person's lucky.
You know, when I was 19, 20 or thereabout, I was playing cricket, I was studying engineering, I was studying French, I was doing all kinds of things in the day. And me and my mother taught psychology, and so we were sitting and talking about luck, and I said, there is no such thing as luck, Mom. She said, come back to me when you're 50. Because I said, look, if I nick a ball, it's not my bad luck that I nicked it, right? I was wrong, the bowler was right, so there is no such thing as luck. My view on luck is, if it comes your way, wow, but you cannot plan for luck. You cannot say, you know what, I'm going out today, and if I'm lucky, this is what's going to happen. So you have to pretend, that's only in my life, you have to pretend that luck doesn't exist. If it exists, great for you, but you have to pretend that luck doesn't exist when you go out. When you go out, it's you, your effort, your understanding, your appreciation of the situation, and your decision making on what to do in a situation. If it works, great for you. You say, wow, thank you, luck. But you don't take luck out with you when you go to bat, because you can't plan for luck. So if luck comes your way, that's fantastic.
And I think it's just not in sport, it's in life, and it's in everything else. I think the question of being in the right place at the right time is what people sometimes define as luck. But you have no idea what effort it takes to constantly be in the right place at the right time. And for that, the first thing I think everyone needs to do is create opportunities where you're going to be in a place and at a time. Because if you don't think of that, you're just waiting for luck in a very different aspect.
You know, I've seen two definitions of luck. One, the best that I've heard, is luck is being ready when opportunity strikes. Opportunity strikes a lot of people, but we're not ready for it, and then we say bad luck. But maybe if you were ready for the opportunity by we say, how much are you willing to do when nobody's watching? If you're doing a lot when nobody's watching, when luck comes your way, you're ready for it. But there's a quote in golf that's been attributed to Arnold Palmer, to Jack Nicklaus, to Gary Player, to everybody. But the line is better than who it's attributed to. It said, the harder I work, the luckier I got.
Yeah.
So you work hard if luck comes your way. But if you're going to say, I was unsuccessful because I was unlucky, you're preventing yourself from being successful the next time. because you're just sitting like a martyr. Martyrs are great to tell your aunt a story. No, it's one of the things boxers teach you is it's not about going down, because everybody does, it's how quickly you come back up. So luck is, if it happens, it's great. In my life, my whole view of luck has changed completely from when I was debating with my mother. She was right, because things happened in my life that needn't have happened. Did they happen because I worked hard, or did they happen because somebody put a hand on my shoulder or on my head and said, blessed to go where you are? I don't know. But luck is something, if it happens, it happens, but you can't plan for it.
Yep. I think we spent the last 30 minutes kind of summarizing that most of the excuses that we make are what they are. They're excuses. I'm the outsider, doesn't really work. I'm unlucky, that doesn't really work. The ball got nicked, nah, and that's not my fault, and anything else is in between and all of that, it's not my fault. I've just been ordained with that. So, the single message anyway is take control of your life in some form or the other, and your self-confidence is the only thing that's going to propel you in any case.
The other thing, Ronnie, I see in this generation, I mean, it happens to everybody, but even now, is it's almost as if failure is a crime.
Yeah.
It's because on Facebook and Instagram, everyone's doing well all the time.
Yeah.
They're lying. Failure is not fatal. I remember Boris Becker came as a teenager, won Wimbledon, and then everyone was watching, and he lost to an unknown Aussie. And everyone said, what happened? And he said, I just lost a tennis match, nobody died. Yeah. If you're afraid of failure, you will invite failure. So it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's not a crime.
Yeah, but I think that's it. The social media puts incredible amount of pressure on the fact, because everyone's only talking about what they did right. Nobody ever comes out and talks what they did wrong.
But you live longer than social media. Remember Orkut? You live longer, correct?
Yeah.
Everyone's saying Facebook, yeah, TikTok, wow. 3 years later, TikTok, who knows?
Yeah. Who knows?
So you live longer.
Okay, so we're going to start with some questions. Are you all going to tell us what the first question that's coming on from online? Before that, we'll just take one from all of us. We've got a great live audience here for all of you all joining and missing out on us. Yeah, why don't we go with you? Yeah, just take the mic quickly so we can.
Sir, you've been such an inspiration. I have taken sports management as a career because of you. There are two things.
I hope you do well, because otherwise you'll blame me.
So there are two things. I have read your first version of The Winning Way. I have brought the second version along with me right now. If you could just give me an autograph on that, that'll be the best.
Was that your question?
That's your question.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, sir, you've identified, how did the transition happen of you identifying your talent and converting it into a profession? So in one of your videos, you've said that talent only opens the first door. So how have you converted it into something which is
extraordinarily overrated talent? It's very, very... Opening the first door is important though. Under 15, under 17, yes, it opens a door for you, and then you're noticed, whereas someone else may not be noticed. But talent gives you success a little easily. And after a while, if talent is all you have, you're very unfortunate, because talent's not opening any more doors for you. So we often talk about attitude, not as in the college he's got attitude types. Attitude decides whether your talent takes you up or drags you down. Eventually it comes down to your approach, to your hard work. If it was about talent, I'd never have made it. So,
question from the audience?
Yeah, the first one.
Yeah, go for it.
Which is, at the time of your MBA, analytics was not as easy as today.
Yes.
Yet you are the master of all analytics and insights. How did you achieve that?
Sometimes when you're deemed to be successful, you're assigned qualities you don't have. So I still remember when Duckworth Lewis first came about, the first example of using algorithms and regressions and whatever to look at outcomes of matches. Everyone assumed that Duckworth Lewis was wrong. They still do, but it's convenient to say that. I remember my brother saying to me once, saying it's okay if a Jeffrey Boycott says Duckworth Lewis is bad because he's not studied it. If you say Duckworth Lewis is bad, I'll be very disappointed with you. So I've learned from people around me. Mathematics didn't come easily to me. So it's whether you try hard enough to understand. You don't have to understand the algorithm. You just have to understand the logic behind what a process is doing. But if you don't understand analytics, you don't have a future today.
Yeah.
So you have to understand analytics. You have to understand what data can do for you. Otherwise, you have no future. So one of the words that is used in management everywhere these days is, can you be nimble? As change comes, are you willing to accept change and accept it? So yes, when we did, I remember when we were doing our MBA, our PGDM as it was called then, we didn't have a lot of data. You had a central statistical organization that from time to time used to throw up data on the economy. You had stuff like that, and then you waited for that and then did the most of what the data was throwing up. On market data, we had one of my bosses would say, listen, we don't have market data, but can we evaluate markets? Can we interpret markets based on what we have? So your intuition and your ability to see through limited data became very powerful. But now you have a lot more data, you have no choice but to understand it. But you can't get lost in it.
Yeah, I have one more very interesting one actually. Do you think you would succeed as a sports commentator if you're asked to start today afresh?
No, because I wouldn't get a chance. I wouldn't get.
You wouldn't get a chance.
I wouldn't get a Ranji Trophy match to do because we live under the misguided notion that if you're a great cricketer, you're a great commentator. If you're a great cricketer, you've got a good chance of understanding the game better. But commentary is not a coaching class. Commentary is telling the story, the emotions, the highs, the excitement, the storytellers. But if I was starting today, no, not a chance in hell.
And if you were a teacher, what would you think that would be?
I come from a family of teachers.
Yeah, so that's why I'm asking you specifically. But when you, because you brought about storytelling, and teaching is also about being engaging about storytelling.
I'd actually love to go back and teach. I don't know if I could.
So if you could reverse the clock, you'd be a teacher and not a commentator.
I don't know if I would want to be a teacher at that time because my father's increment was 40, 50, 60. Yeah? So your pay scales were 7 to 19, 12 to 26. If you became a professor, then you got an increment of 60 rupees or 80 rupees, or something like that.
Yeah, I just want everyone to get the context of rupees because I think they were thinking percentages here. I could see some eyes and eyebrows raised here that were percentages here.
My starting salary in Rediffusion was 1,900 rupees a month out of IIM Ahmedabad. My grandmother used to say, 1 kilo mein 16 se ghee milta tha. And we used to laugh. People laugh at it that way. But you know what it taught us? It taught us to live within your means. When we were growing up, income minus saving was expenditure. Saving was mandatory because you never knew what lay tomorrow, what lay ahead. Today it's income minus expenditure. If that's still positive, then that's saving. Otherwise you're rolling EMI, rolling your credit.
So in just terms of learning, and since we're on that topic, I wanted to, because I think today when you're putting that context and you've got that, when you said, if I had to do this all over again, would I get an opportunity? The way we learn today, is that very different from when you sort of, and what are the one or two striking things for you that the way we learn and that the opportunities, because I think everyone is still skeptical, and the opportunities, as you said, we haven't got it better in this generation than ever before.
No, I'll tell you, some years ago, we were doing an event for Cisco. And the Southeast Asia head of Cisco said 1706 was a great time to be young and French. 1806 was a great time to be young and British. 1906 was a great time to be young and American. 2006 is a great time to be young and Indian. 13 years later, I still accept that. So you've got so many opportunities. Sometimes it's not good to have so many. We didn't have opportunities, so we had to make the most of what we got. So we learned resilience. We said, if things are not working, I have no choice, right? That's why arranged marriages worked. You had no choice, you had to make it work. That's why jobs worked. That's why jobs worked. That's why your parents had 40, 50-year marriages. Because they had no choice, they had to make it work. And that's why you had a very good upbringing. Similarly in jobs, we didn't have the option, so we learned resilience. If you have too many options sometimes, you're always jumping from one place to the other. And one of my friends who then became CEO of one of India's largest FMCG companies said, if I see a CV where people are just jumping, there's only one place it goes to, and that's the bin. Because it means you've not learned what to do in tough situations. Yeah. If you're jumping jobs, the moment you are in a tough situation, you learn nothing at all. So resilience is sometimes is not a very popular byproduct anymore because of the options. Yeah. So in your generation, you've actually got to understand what to do with the options.
And I think it's become a bragging value today. It's like, but we don't need to be in a job for more than 2 years. It just means either you're being too opportunistic about something, but you're definitely not learning because you're not standstill enough to be able to learn there. And I think that gap is huge.
And don't snigger at the earlier generation. Some people I notice they're looking around and think, what
no, I don't mean
no, not you. I was just looking around here. No, but I'll tell you very simple. Because money meant that much, Anita and me have never ever taken a loan. Because we had no choice but to live within our means. So it wasn't such a bad way to live then. My friends in finance
At that
told
time,
me
you
that
didn't
was
have
the
a
worst.
credit card or a debit card. And now you have to choose between a credit
So
card
when
or a
I
debit
went
card.
on cricket tours, everyone came and flashed their credit cards at hotels. We had to pull out traveler's checks and leave them at reception as guarantee.
Yeah.
We didn't have credit cards.
Okay, one more.
Yeah. So this is about what changes have you seen in the Indian cricket team as captaincies have changed, and what can corporate managers learn from that in terms of managing a team?
I think that leadership depends. Successful leaders are leaders for specific circumstances. We often talk, Ronnie, in the presentations that we do about wartime generals and peacetime managers. Some situations require wartime generals. It's interesting that Winston Churchill lost the first election after the war because they no longer needed a Churchill.
Yep.
They needed someone now to handle a peacetime situation. They didn't need someone, as we often say, to take all the food from Bengal and take it somewhere else. But that's a separate story. But Saurav Ganguly was a wartime general. You needed a leader like that at a time when India were coming out of match fixing. India were coming out of a generation that was going out, an underconfident generation. You needed someone like that. But we've been very, very lucky with our cricket captains because after Saurav Ganguly, we had a magnificent peacetime manager in Rahul Dravid. He was a fantastic captain, never given the credit that he deserves as a captain. Anil Kumble for that little period. Dhoni had a far tougher assignment because when Dhoni became captain, the champions were on their way out. So he had to live with his resources. So his job was different. He became a defensive captain in Test cricket and a different captain in the white ball game. So you've got the qualities that you possess should tie in with the situation in which you're a leader. If you're a gambler, then you may be inappropriate to be leading a company at a certain time. If you are, if you're a very good maintenance leader, then you may not be a great entrepreneur, and if your company needs that. So I think different situations warrant different leaders, and I think India were very lucky with Saurav Ganguly then and Dhoni after that.
And you stopped and not talking about Virat?
We'll wait and see. His work in progress.
Okay, fine.
Virat is throwing up some very interesting issues as leaders about how, if you're extraordinarily gifted, do you always make the best leader?
Best leader. That's actually I wanted you to say something similar.
Sometimes
to that.
if you're extraordinarily gifted,
because
you don't understand.
Then you look at the world from a very different lens, and from the person's point of view, very justifiably so.
So we'll wait and see because Virat is still captain. You judge someone after he's done to see what.
Which is an interesting way to look at leadership also. Sometimes it's about leading at that moment, but a lot of it is to do with legacy. I mean, what you've done and what you left behind, I think is also
Actually, I think
part
Ronnie's
of
better suited to answer that because Ronnie started a lot of successful companies and finished through. So you're probably better placed to answer that question than I am because I've been an individual in this world, you've been a leader.
No, but I think legacy plays an important role as far as that is concerned. Yep, next.
Yep, and I think this is for both of you. Given that your experience, can you talk about how careers are changing and careers of tomorrow? That's it. Little cue there.
So what are careers of tomorrow?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I think you've just got to be ready for what careers are coming your way. You've got to be nimble. You've got to say, okay, this is coming my way. Can I do it? Can I not do it? I don't know if you can forecast careers, but I think the one thing is clear. I remember meeting the principal of St. Stephen's College many years ago when we were wondering what to do with our son. I was in Delhi, and he said, everyone comes to my college and does BA Honours Economics. He said, I tell everyone do mathematics, not economics, because that is what is going to last you all your life. If you can't crunch numbers today, then you're in trouble. But even more so, if you cannot understand people, you're in trouble. So I think the careers of tomorrow are going to be about understanding people and understanding numbers. If you can do both, you're wow.
I think you need to evaluate your own opportunities also. I mean, I think in my first part of my life, I did media and entertainment. In my second part, I'm focusing on education.
Yeah.
I think education is a career of tomorrow. It's just about how you believe you can walk from one to another. So a lot of this depends on your own clarity, your own self-confidence in what you want to drive, rather than figuring out, because then you're always chasing something else which may not be true to you. So that's something you need to introspect on when you do that. Let's take one question from the audience because we want there. Go ahead. Yeah, there's a mic. Yeah, but we need the mic because everyone online needs to also sort of hear your question. Go ahead.
You said that you would love to be a teacher. Unknowingly you are.
Well, actually, I asked him that.
Yeah, in between. So unknowingly you are a teacher. We have all loved the sessions that we have watched through the internet and all. because we have been interacting with the students, we have passed this information to them as well. When they are learning how to communicate, we have told them to watch your sessions and listen to the sessions that you have taken. Wherein, because when we listen, we speak the way we listen. So that's one part. I mean, just to appreciate.
I must, there must be a little disclaimer there. The corporate events that we do, I do with my wife Anita. She's the brains, I'm the deliverer. She bakes the cake, I put the ribbon on top. So we do that together, but
there's an art to that. There's an art to that.
There's an art to
I acknowledge the same with my wife and Zarina when we do that and many other things, but there's an art to both.
Yeah.
There's a yin and a yang, so I think you should take the credit for that part at least.
But
So
speaking,
they're an unusual household in that she's the hardcore quant numbers mathematics driven person, and I'm the slightly fluffy person. So.
yeah, so what to speak and how to speak, both the things go side by side. So anyways, I mean, coming back to the question that we have heard a story about, I don't know how much true it was, but Virat and Rohit Sharma's. Okay, so the same thing happens almost in every team, and how do we cope up about it?
For a start, I don't know if the story is true because I have a very healthy disregard for what appears in mass media.
I mean, if you do not know, none of us can.
Yeah, but
Luckily, I need to know. Luckily, I need to know. But your larger point is valid.
Yeah, larger point is
the larger point is you've got two superstars playing together. Remember, when two superstars are playing together, whether it's, I mean, with Messi and Ronaldo, they're playing in different sides. If it's Messi and Neymar playing together, if it's Messi and Suarez playing together in football, football is a more dramatic example because it's a greater team sport than cricket is. But where you have two very driven people, it is inevitable that they will compete with each other. The question is, does that competition between them destroy the larger entity, which is the team, or does it strengthen the larger entity, which is the team? And if there's respect for each other and respect for each other's achievement, it will strengthen the team. But if it is a duel, which was the old way of resolving battle, then it will destroy the company.
I mean,
it goes back to the quintessential point of what's the final goal. It's the goal that we want to win on something. You know, it's a team sport. Why participate in something which is not a team sport? Go play a single team.
Do you think Tendulkar and Dravid didn't have a rivalry within each other? Yes.
I mean, as long as the boat is sailing, everything looks fine from outside.
You have to make the boat sail. The boat does not sail by itself. You have to make the boat sail. Shane Warne talks about it at great depth because everyone thinks that great Australian side was, wow, everyone playing for each other. He said you must have respect. You needn't be friends. Greenwich and Haynes, they were not friends. But when they opened the batting together, they played for each other. Once they left the field, you don't have to be friends. I mean, suppose you're working here together, doesn't mean you have to have a drink together every night. When you're together, you respect each other's job, you play for each other, then you go back home, you don't have to. So within that Australian team, there are people who couldn't stand each other. But it doesn't matter. When you cross the line, you play for each other. Once you come out, so if the two players, stars, don't like each other, on the field, they play for each other, there's a common goal. Off the field, they do what they want to.
Okay, one more from the...
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello Harsha, I am from IMA2 and we have been taught framework thinking. I wanted to know
What?
framework thinking.
Framework thinking, yeah?
I wanted to know how important it has been in your work career and how would you advise for or against it?
I don't know where my frame was. Management education in the mid-80s was very, very different from what it is now. The opportunities were far fewer. The vision was very different. So you were taught for the reality of the times, just as the courses today have to teach the reality of the times today. So framework thinking, because our world was bounded in those days. So we were taught organization theory. We were taught so much about how organizations worked, and we had courses in organizations and how they work, because that was the goal. There were no entrepreneurs in those days. So it would be very different. If you're a post-2005, ideally post-95, but the effects of what happened in the early 90s in India started to come through by the late 90s, early 2000s, then I'm a fossil, I'm irrelevant. Because your education and the world you live in is completely different.
Yeah, and we have one more interesting one actually. If you both were given an opportunity if both of you were given an opportunity to swap your careers with each other, how would you react?
No, I wouldn't. I'd be an utter failure. No, I'd just be a failure.
Now come on, you
I would not run organizations. I mean, I might have run organizations well, but Ronnie moved from, what is your first business?
Cable television.
Cable television to making
Toothbrushes,
Western outdoor, making cinema. Now into education. It requires a certain frame of mind. I'm not sure I had that because I was stressed myself. I wouldn't have slept well at night. I don't think I would have made a great leader.
And I think I've already answered that question by saying I own 3 sports teams and I don't play sports. And the last thing I would be able to do is to give depth of information, because actually you do. It's not about your communication skills when you're doing something like commentary, and I know because my son-in-law does that, and the kind of homework you need to do, the kind of research you need to do, and the kind of detail.
And he does it well.
And so I'm saying I wouldn't swap places because I'm not that depth and a details and a research person.
Yes, Ronnie was a good television host.
Yeah.
Some of you go back on YouTube, see if you find it and have a chuckle.
Yeah, hi. So you wanted this advertisement career really bad,
Yes.
but if I'm not wrong, you left it after 2 years.
Yes.
So did you think it was not your?
No, I loved it.
Then
I guess
if-
the question is quite pertinent. How can you like something, want something so
Yeah,
hard,
and I mean,
2
leave it
years
after
later
2 years.
feel no?
I mean, your learning stopped, or
No.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a personal question, but why did you leave it so early?
No, I worked in Rediffusion for 2 years and 3 months. At that time, I was also doing a little bit of commentary. And I found that my work in Rediffusion prevented me from working on the 1987 World Cup. Because there's a couple of matches I couldn't go to, and that's fair, you're employed by an organization. I couldn't go to those matches, they didn't have my recordings. When the 1987 World Cup commentary team was being put together, they didn't have anyone. I was only 26 years old. And I said, so what do I want more? So I moved into a firm that was doing what was then called sports management. It wasn't much, but that was what we were doing then, to see what would happen. One of the great advantages of having a good education is occasionally you can take a punt on yourself. And so if that had not worked, I knew I could get a job back in advertising because I'd worked in a very good agency, I'd done all right.
So to put you in the dock on that a little bit, Harsha,
Yep.
because I think part of the advice we gave people was, but you're jumping careers every 2 years.
Yes.
So did you feel you were jumping careers every 2 years?
No, because I only jumped once. And I jumped once, knowing if it doesn't work, I'll come back into this career. But
Yeah.
I said, okay, let's see what happens. You know, we didn't have, as I keep saying, we didn't have a lot of options. In Hyderabad, we have a saying, karke dekho miyan. Zyada kya hoinga? Nahi hoinga. The approach is very simple. Go
But
try
you
and do it.
exercised a choice. It was your
So-
choice and you exercised a choice. And that's
But,
important.
Yeah, so I wasn't saying I was unhappy. I was in love with Rediffusion. I actually wrote what someone will laugh at now, a very sentimental letter to my boss saying, you know, I really don't want to quit, but you know, Cancerians, very emotional people. And they had a big laugh over my letter. I worked for 2 years in Rediffusion. I'm still on the Rediffusion WhatsApp group. I only worked there for 2 years. But we made friends over there. I loved the process of creating advertising from a brief to a finished product. So, and what I learned in those 2 years was mind-blowing. The atmosphere was excellent, so I have absolutely no regrets. I only moved for a reason that, as it turned out, was a good one. But
Okay, I think we got time for the last 2 questions.
Yeah, Samak is asking about midlife career crisis. Your views on there are people who discover their passion much later in life, and then it becomes impossible to change. Any advices for them?
It's a good question.
what would you do? You change?
Yeah. No, but it's a good question because I think it is a personal choice. But yeah, go ahead.
It's very glamorized, changing professions and suddenly going into an unconnected profession because you see the success stories. And if there's one success story, there's probably 1,000 failures. And so you look at that one success story and you think, wow, that's what it's going to be like. That can be an inspiration, but that cannot be a formula. So if someone has done it, you could, but you've got to go with that person's attitude. In my case, I had no option but to be the best in India. Whether I became that or no was to happen later. And you had to do everything. So sometimes you've got to take a pragmatic decision based on where you are in life. If you've got expenses building up and you've got savings, so everything is a very pragmatic decision. It's very romanticized to say, you know what, I'll follow my heart. No, you follow your heart after your head has taken its call. So,
That's very important.
Yeah, a lot of people will say, I mean, you did it, why are you telling other people not to? No.
So your advice to anyone who talks about
Head.
midlife crisis? I mean,
Head. Head, Where am I in life? What are my expenses coming ahead? What if it doesn't work? I've got all that, then I will do it. Entrepreneurs don't think like that, but I wasn't an entrepreneur. Say if you're thinking of a safety net, you've already started wrong.
Yeah.
Because the moment there's a safety net, you'll take it. But if you've got children, if you've got a family, you've got to take a pragmatic decision as well. You cannot say, I want to pursue my dream and all of you shall stay hungry. So it's got to be, so each person has got to weigh it with the reality of their own situation.
Yep. Maybe we can take the last one live.
Yeah, we can take a last one right from here live. Okay, why don't you go forward? Just give it a mic quickly. If there's one hanging around there, we can pass it on. Yeah,
Behind
right
you,
there.
right.
Lately, in the name of agility, a lot of companies want to be agile or nimble, as we say.
Yes.
But they end up taking a lot of too many decisions in a short span. Doesn't that affect, in a leadership perspective, doesn't that affect business?
Are they constantly changing their decision-making
absolutely.
process?
So it's called, nowadays it's in the guise of agility. That it's
Agility is
agile
important.
company.
In a lot of organizations that we go to give talks to, one of the things people say is we need to be agile, we need to be nimble. I think it means we need to be nimble with our awareness of where markets are going, where the economy is going, and are we therefore stuck with yesterday's products? We talk with the VUCA world these days. So you've got to be nimble enough to be able to accept what is coming your way, but you cannot keep changing. You cannot keep changing all the time. But you've got to ask yourself, am I yesterday's product in today's market? Sometimes companies will lose one little strand. Nokia missed one little thing. Kodak missed the digital revolution. Giants came down. So you ask yourself, is my product relevant today? To that extent, you've got to be agile and nimble. But very often being nimble is checking distribution, maybe checking talent, maybe checking the product mix, maybe just checking funds flow. You could be agile in that within the same product as well. So it doesn't mean you keep jumping ship all the time, then you're a hedge fund.
Yeah. All right, we're going to wind up, and Harsha, I'm just going to ask you for one straight line to the camera, which is, whichever one. You can pick whichever one you know. You're the expert at spotting the camera that's got the that's got the red light on in most places. But if you had to give advice today to your 30-year-old daughter or cousin or nephew, I'm not aging you.
As it turns out, I have a son that age.
I'm not aging you up, Sam. I'm keeping the option open with saying cousin brother, whichever we want to do that. What would that be?
It would be work your backside off, enjoy life, but be positive at all times about life, but work your backside off. And
but this hard work is now younger generation, it's all cliche, right?
No, it doesn't change. Honesty is a cliche, it doesn't change. Hard work never changes, but be very positive and don't be afraid of failure. That's the only thing I'll say. Be positive, don't be afraid of failure. Because I know players, I've gone out to bat afraid of a bouncer. I don't know how the bowler discovered that, but my first ball was a bouncer. If you're afraid of things, they happen to you. So don't be afraid of failure. Don't invite it, but don't be afraid of failure and be positive in what you do.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Harsha. Thanks for taking the time out.
Can we now do this all over again with me interviewing Ronnie?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Lovely. Thanks. Hope you enjoyed the hour and was worth it on a Saturday evening.